In the warm heart of an English summer in 1955, a story unfolded that could match any suspenseful novel. It was here that Reverend Philip St. John Ross, a respected vicar, encountered a fate that seemed both tragic and final. A holiday by the sea, meant for relaxation, ended in heartbreak, leaving his wife engulfed in grief and his congregation in a state of shock. His presumed drowning was seen as a cruel twist of fate, a respected life abruptly surrendered to the unpredictable sea. However, this narrative was about to take an unexpected turn. 2 years later, the story was dramatically rewritten when the deceased Reverend was spotted not in the English countryside he once knew, but in the breathtaking landscapes of Switzerland. Accompanying him was Kathleen Ryall, a woman completely unconnected to his past. Together, under the guise of Mr. and Mrs. Davies, they had forged a new, clandestine life, starkly different from the vicar's previous existence of commitment and service. This revelation sent shockwaves through the community he had once led. The man they had mourned, a guiding light in their lives, had orchestrated his own disappearance. Behind his mysterious decision was a tangle of speculation, suggesting a struggle between duty and desire, faith and personal truth. As more about Reverend Philip St. John Ross's story came to light, it revealed deeper layers of identity, morality, and the hidden challenges of living a public life. His existence after death opened up a story of intrigue and scandal, blurring the lines between truth and deception and casting doubt on what we accept as reality. In this ongoing story, each new revelation brings more questions, each detail part of a complex puzzle. The tale of Reverend Ross is more than a narrative of choices. It's a dive into human complexity, where moral boundaries are unclear, and the pursuit of truth leads us down a path of endless intrigue. Stay tuned as we dare to delve deeper into the enigmatic story of Reverend Philip St. John Ross. We will explore the tangled web of his secret life, the truths buried beneath layers of deception, and the resonating impact of his actions. This journey will take us beyond the surface, into the heart of a mystery that continues to echo through time, challenging our perceptions of faith, identity, and the human capacity for change. The drowning. In 1955, the picturesque English coast bore witness to a drama as profound as the sea itself. It was here, amidst the tranquil lull of waves and the whispering sea breeze, that Reverend Philip St. John Ross, a vicar held in high regard, faced an unforeseen destiny. The vicar, known for his eloquence and devout service, had chosen this serene setting for a holiday retreat, seeking perhaps a respite from his pastoral duties. The day was much like any other in the quaint seaside town, with tourists and locals alike basking in the summer's embrace. Unbeknownst to his congregation and family, this holiday would be Ross's last public appearance. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the water, a tragedy unfolded. News spread rapidly through the town. Reverend Ross had drowned. His disappearance into the depths was initially perceived as a tragic accident, a soul claimed by the unpredictable nature of the sea. The community was engulfed in grief. Ross, who had been a pillar of strength and guidance, was now a memory shrouded in sorrow. His family, particularly his wife, grappled with a profound loss, their lives upended by the sudden void left by his absence. The congregation mourned a spiritual leader who had guided them with wisdom and compassion. Tributes poured in, and the church he had served became a sanctuary of mourning. The official account stated that Reverend Ross had gone for a swim, a routine pleasure in the quiet hours of the afternoon. But as evening approached and he did not return, concern grew. A search was initiated, but as night fell, hope dimmed. The sea, in its vastness, offered no clues, and the Reverend was presumed lost to its depths. The local authorities, after a thorough but fruitless search, declared it a drowning, a tragic end to a life devoted to faith and community. In the days that followed, the seaside town, usually alive with the joys of summer, was subdued, its spirit dampened by the tragedy. The church's bells tolled not for celebration, but for loss, echoing through the streets and in the hearts of those who had looked to Ross for guidance. The vicar's death was not just a personal loss, but a communal one, leaving a scar on the soul of the town. Yet, as the community mourned, questions lingered in hushed tones. Some spoke of the vicar's recent demeanor, of a certain restlessness that had seemed to cloud his usual composure. Others pondered the cruel irony of a man of faith meeting his end in such an unfathomable manner. But in the face of grief, these whispers remained subdued, overshadowed by the collective mourning of a beloved figure's untimely departure. Reverend Philip St. John Ross's apparent drowning was a moment etched in time, a poignant reminder of life's fragility and the mysteries that sometimes lie beneath the calmest surfaces. It was a chapter that closed too soon, leaving behind a legacy of faith, questions unanswered, and a narrative far from complete. The aftermath. The aftermath of Reverend Philip St. John Ross's presumed drowning rippled through his family and congregation, casting a pall over the community he had served with devotion. His wife, a woman of quiet strength, found herself in the throes of an unimaginable grief. Once a partner to a respected vicar, she now faced a life unmoored, grappling with the void left by her husband's sudden departure. Their home, once a haven of warmth and love, echoed with the silence of loss. The congregation, too, was shaken to its core. Reverend Ross had been more than just a spiritual leader. He was a confidant, a guiding light, and his absence left a gaping wound in the fabric of the church community. The Sunday services, once filled with his resonant voice and insightful sermons, now felt hollow. The pews, which had welcomed the young and old alike under his watch, bore the weight of sorrow and confusion. In the days following the tragic news, the church became a refuge for those seeking solace. Members of the congregation gathered, not in joyous worship, but in shared mourning, their prayers intermingled with tears. Stories of Reverend Ross's kindness, his unwavering faith, and his commitment to his flock were shared, each anecdote a testament to the impact he had made in their lives. For the community, the loss was more than spiritual. Reverend Ross had been a pillar in local events, his presence a symbol of unity and hope. His involvement in charity work, youth programs, and community gatherings highlighted a life dedicated not just to faith, but to service. His absence was felt in every corner of the town. From the quiet streets he had walked to the lives he had touched. The church elders and fellow clergy faced the daunting task of filling the void left by Reverend Ross. They strove to offer comfort and leadership, but the shadow of his loss loomed large. The question of who could carry on his legacy was a constant undercurrent amid the grief. In this time of uncertainty, the church's role as a community cornerstone was tested, its resilience under the strain of unexpected tragedy. In the wider diocese, the news of Reverend Ross's passing stirred a mixture of sorrow and concern. His colleagues in the clergy grappled with the loss of a fellow servant of God, reflecting on the unpredictable nature of life and the sometimes inexplicable ways of fate. The turn of events. 2 years after the solemn bells tolled for Reverend Philip St. John Ross, the tranquil narrative of his tragic demise was shattered by a revelation as startling as it was improbable. The vicar, believed to have been claimed by the sea, was not resting in its depths, but was very much alive, breathing the crisp air of the Swiss Alps. This astounding turn of events unfolded when a former parishioner, vacationing in Switzerland, spotted a man whose resemblance to Reverend Ross was uncanny. The encounter, initially dismissed as a mistaken identity, soon spiraled into a scandalous truth. Investigations revealed that the man was indeed Ross, living under an assumed identity, far from the shores of England and the life he had left behind. Accompanying him in this clandestine existence was Kathleen Ryall, a woman unknown to Ross's former life, sharing a residence under the guise of Mr. and Mrs. Davies. The discovery sent shockwaves back to his hometown, upending the narrative of loss and grief that had enveloped the community. The congregation, who had mourned and memorialized their vicar, now grappled with a torrent of emotions: betrayal, disbelief, and a deep sense of perplexity. The news of Ross's astonishing reappearance spread like wildfire, igniting a media frenzy. Questions abounded. How had the Reverend managed to orchestrate such a deception? What drove a man of faith to abandon his calling, his family, and his community? The answers to these questions were shrouded in mystery, the motives behind Ross's actions obscured by the passing of time and the secrecy of his new life. His family, particularly his wife, who had mourned him as a widow, faced an unimaginable reality. The sorrow of loss was now compounded by the sting of betrayal. The church, which had offered solace in the wake of his death, now struggled to reconcile the spiritual guidance of a man who had so profoundly deceived them. The aftermath of the revelation was tumultuous. While some expressed anger and a sense of betrayal, others were engulfed in confusion, unable to reconcile the vicar they knew with the man who had fabricated his own demise. The church leadership and local authorities grappled with the legal and ethical implications of the case, facing the challenge of addressing a situation that defied conventional understanding. The new identity. In the quiet serenity of Switzerland, a world away from his past life, Reverend Philip St. John Ross embarked on a new chapter under the guise of Mr. Davies, with Kathleen Ryall as Mrs. Davies. This newfound identity was a stark departure from his former existence as a respected vicar in England. In this picturesque haven, Ross and Ryall wove a tapestry of anonymity, far removed from the responsibilities and relationships he had left behind. Their life in Switzerland was a picture of ordinary tranquility, markedly different from Ross's previous life, filled with spiritual duties and community engagement. This new existence was built on the foundations of secrecy and reinvention, with Ross shedding his clerical persona for a more mundane role. Details of their daily life in this alpine retreat are sparse, as they maintained a low profile. Ross's transition from a public figure to an obscure resident was complete, with no traces of his past identity in his new lifestyle. He and Ryall created a world for themselves that was self-contained, seemingly content in their seclusion and the life they had crafted away from prying eyes. The relationship between Ross and Ryall, hidden from the world, raises questions about the nature of their connection and the circumstances that led to this drastic transformation of identity. Their companionship in this self-imposed exile was a key aspect of Ross's new identity, suggesting a bond that compelled him to abandon everything he once held dear. This chapter of Ross's life, under the assumed names in Switzerland, remains shrouded in mystery. The community shock. As expected, the revelation that Reverend Philip St. John Ross was alive sent shockwaves through his former community and the church. The congregation, which had grieved his presumed death, was now faced with a maelstrom of emotions. Disbelief and confusion rippled through the pews as members struggled to reconcile the spiritual leader they had mourned with the man who had willfully vanished. In the church, where Ross had once been a beacon of guidance, his actions sparked a crisis of faith. The betrayal was profound. A man who had been a moral and spiritual guide had deceived them in the most dramatic fashion. This breach of trust left a deep wound, shaking the foundations of the community's belief system. Ross's family, especially his wife, bore the brunt of this astonishing turn of events. The grief of losing a husband had been overwhelming, but the shock of his deception was a different kind of trauma. The community's sympathy for her plight was immense, as she grappled with the public and personal implications of her husband's actions. The wider church body and clergy were also forced to confront the implications of Ross's deceit. It raised uncomfortable questions about accountability and the vulnerability of faith communities to the failings of their leaders. The church had to navigate this difficult situation, balancing the need to provide support to the congregation while dealing with the fallout from Ross's actions. For the local community, the news was a source of scandal and intrigue. The story of the vicar who had faked his own death and was living a secret life abroad was fodder for discussions and speculation. It challenged the image of the quintessential English village, where life was seemingly predictable and orderly. The motives. Behind the meticulously orchestrated disappearance of Reverend Philip St. John Ross lay a labyrinth of potential reasons and motivations, each more intriguing and complex than the last. The decision to fake one's death, particularly for a man of the cloth, is not taken lightly, suggesting a profound internal conflict or a compelling external pressure. One possible motivation could be a desire for escape. The burdens of his clerical duties, the expectations of his congregation, and the responsibilities of his public persona might have become overwhelming. Ross might have longed for a simpler existence, free from the weight of his responsibilities and the scrutiny that came with his role. This yearning for anonymity could have driven him to the extreme measure of faking his own death. Another factor could be the nature of his relationship with Kathleen Ryall. It's conceivable that their relationship, possibly frowned upon or forbidden due to his marital and clerical status, pushed him towards this drastic action. The need to be with Ryall might have outweighed his commitment to his family, congregation, and vows, prompting him to choose a life with her over his existing obligations. Ross's mental and emotional state at the time also warrants consideration. The pressures of living a life in the public eye, constantly serving others, can take a significant toll. It's possible that he reached a breaking point, where the only perceived solution was to start fresh, away from the life that was causing him distress. Financial or legal troubles, though less documented, cannot be ruled out as motivators. The possibility of undisclosed debts or legal issues could have contributed to his decision, offering a way out of a situation that seemed otherwise inescapable. The secrecy surrounding his new life in Switzerland with Ryall also suggests a deliberate and calculated decision rather than a spur-of-the-moment act. This implies a level of planning and forethought, indicating that whatever his reasons, they were compelling enough to plan and execute such an elaborate deception. Finally, the possibility of a spiritual or existential crisis should be considered. As a religious leader, Ross might have experienced doubts or conflicts about his faith or role, leading to a radical decision to abandon his life and start anew. That said, Reverend Philip St. John Ross's disappearance was likely driven by a complex web of personal, emotional, and possibly practical considerations. The precise combination of factors remains shrouded in the mystery that enveloped his life post-disappearance. His story is a poignant reminder of the multifaceted nature of human motivations and the lengths to which individuals might go in search of resolution or escape. The outcome. Specific details about what happened to Reverend Philip St. John Ross after he was discovered living in Switzerland with Kathleen Ryall under assumed names are scant. The focus of the known accounts is primarily on the shock of his reappearance and the initial revelation of his faked death. In many such cases, the discovery of someone who has faked their own death can lead to a variety of outcomes, including legal repercussions, strained or broken personal relationships, and significant changes in lifestyle or identity. However, without specific information, it's difficult to determine the exact aftermath in the case of Reverend Philip St. John Ross. Join the conversation. Drop a comment to share your thoughts and insights. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more captivating content. Thanks for tuning in to Really Unreal. Join us next time for a deep dive into another fascinating case. Stay curious, stay connected, stay with Really Unreal.